The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
Hey everybody, we're going to do a All Ask CJ episode today. So we're taking all of your questions that you sent in through Blue Sky, Twitter, Message in a Bottle, letters to Santa, and we're going to send them all to Chris Kringle over here, and we're going to get him to answer as many as we can. How does that sound?
It sounds good. I actually watched a Christmas movie over the holidays where the kid had dyslexia, and instead of writing Santa, he sent his letter to Satan, and then Satan, and then Satan actually answers it, and it's anyway. It was, but it was actually, but it was actually a good movie. I wish I should have clocked the name of it, but it was cute. It was just a cute movie. Anyway, then he's got Satan like fulfilling his wishes for him.
No way.
Yeah, it's a Farrelly Brothers movie. Like, it was cute. It was cute.
What? What's the movie called?
I don't know.
You don't know what it was called?
I'm so bad at that. And it's a Christmas movie. They're all called a variation of the same thing.
Oh man. I saw one called Meet Me Next Christmas or something, where this woman meets a guy at an airport, and there's anyway.
I saw that
go on the Netflix movie. Like, I'm not gonna go in on the plot too much here because I'm really bad at explaining plots. But like, why do you have Christina Milian in a movie who's able to sing, and you don't have her using her real voice singing?
Maybe she didn't want to sing.
But that's ridiculous.
My movie was called Dear Santa.
Okay, Dear Santa. Okay.
But just like, it was pretty funny. He writes to Satan instead of Santa.
Did you see there's another Christmas movie going around where it's basically about, they basically have characters who are supposed to be Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift.
Oh, I saw that one. And
like one of, like, there's supposed to be some scene where like the Taylor Swift characters are like, I don't know who this guy is supposed to be and all that. And then like her friend is all like, he's the 9-time MVP and he leads the league in yards received. Like, it's this stupid scene.
And his
like,
brother's the quarterback. I watched that one.
Like, and his brother's like super small too. Like, what is this movie?
It was pretty good, man. What are you hating?
It was pretty good.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. I'd love to. All right. Ebert.
I love a Christmas movie.
It's a take from you.
I got to take. I love a Christmas movie, and so you lower your bar with a Christmas movie. Like it doesn't have to be, because really it's just meant to make you all feel gooey and happy inside, and you don't have to think too much around the holidays. So I like that movie. There's actually two movies. There's another one that takes place actually in Kansas City, and I think the NFL was behind it because they use all the Chiefs trademarks and stuff. And then it's like a family that owns this like Chiefs fan store. And then anyway, that one was good too. I watched a ton of Christmas movies this year.
I should probably just, I realize it's only hitting me now that I laugh my ass off at that plot. It's just jokes, people. I don't, dyslexia is very serious. I just want to plotline's so funny.
And Satan shows up and he's got his letter and it's all like crisp and burnt because it went down to hell. Instead of going to the North Pole.
We'll get to these questions. I'm sorry, guys. Insider J Money, friend of the show. If it wasn't foggy that Christmas night, do you think Rudolph would be flipping burgers instead of being on Santa's team?
Maybe. I mean, sometimes the moment chooses you, right? I mean, if it wasn't foggy that night, I mean, I got to think if you had a nose that lit up, you could do something else other than guide a sleigh through the fog. But, it doesn't mean you'd necessarily go straight to flipping burgers. But, I mean, that's an honest way to make your living, too. So could be for Rudolph.
I specifically asked that question because of the flipping burgers part, because, like, your Wendy's days.
Yeah, man. The 4-corner press.
Hey,
I still have the I haven't done it in a long time, but I still have the muscle memory of doing that. I flipped a lot of burgers in those days.
Hey, man. And look at you.
I wonder
if
that process has been automated by now. I mean, that's been a long time since I worked at Wendy's.
At least 20 years? 30 years?
Oh, yeah, longer. It was the late 90s. So 25 plus.
Damn. I was a child in the late 90s. Anyway.
Yeah, well, you could have been a child coming through Wendy's, and I would have given you the best damn burger you ever had.
I think I had only gone to a Wendy's for the first time in my life, like some point in my teenage years. It's not like a chain that I go to like all the time. Like, I don't know if it doesn't need to. I like Wendy's. Like, I'm just not be hating on Wendy's. Just like,
it was like
Harvey's.
It was like over the holidays, I had some Swiss Chalet. And that's like a big thing for my partner and her family. Like they always had it when they were kids and stuff. And I was like, I just never really had this as a kid, but we didn't have one in Coburg. It's really good. Like I'm not hating on it, but it's kind of, you're shaped by where you grow up a little bit too.
Yeah.
Thank goodness we had a pizza in Coburg though. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know if Swiss Chalet was a thing in Quebec either. It's, well, I guess
Saint Hubert, right?
Well, Saint Hubert is it, but also like in Montreal specifically, like you're either going to Chalet Barbecue or Côte Saint Luc Barbecue, I guess, for those types of chicken spots, but also like I grew up in a West Indian household. My mom makes good jerk chicken and other types of chicken. I didn't need to go to those spots, right? So anyway,
well, I had a great festive special from Swiss Chalet over the holidays too. So not only have I been watching great movies, I've been eating great food too.
Man, I guess at some point I'll try Swiss Chalet. I've never had it.
The Chalet sauce in particular is really good.
We're giving a lot of promo to these restaurant chains that could easily be nameplates for the Chris Johnston show. So,
well, we're just test driving a few things out over the holidays here.
Yeah, you mentioned. Yeah, I think we mentioned one. I think we mentioned one place that last little bit. That, well, actually, I don't know if it's too soon to say. But anyway,
move on.
Let's get through some of these questions. Irish Hab on B Sky Social. Where will Jake Evans end up?
Wow, I have not thought about that for even 1 second before this moment.
Are you serious?
Well, none is a bad thing. Like that's just a really random. Like Jake Evans doesn't even make the trade board at this point. I'm going to say he stays in Montreal, just for fun, because I don't have a better answer. But obviously depth centerman that could be on the move in the final year of his deal. But maybe he sticks around in the Canadians on a cheap deal.
I think Eric Engels has written about that situation, and he asked Jake Evans about it. He said he's heard just crickets on his contract situation. Not that bad of a cap at 1.7 mil, but yeah, a good bottom six center who's come up from that system. I think it was like a 7th round pick.
Yeah. He's traveled the long road. Isn't he? Is he the longest tenured? One of the longest tenured players in the organization too.
I would think so, which is kind of wild, but I remember covering him.
Obviously, Brendan Gallagher's been there longer, for example.
Yeah, Brendan Gallagher would be the longest tenured guy,
but he's one of the longer tenured players with the team, which is just kind of strange to get your mind around. But this is what a rebuild looks like. Not a lot of lasting power, right? Everyone comes and goes,
right? But he was even there before the rebuild, right? Still really interesting that he's at that point. Jake Larivière, with Artem Zub sidelined, the Sens were originally looking at getting some D help, but obviously this was written before it ended. But obviously they're on a 6-game heater. Are the Sens still looking for upgrades on D, or is it an if an 8 broke, don't fix it type of situation? Before you answer, the Senators need some defensive help, and I know I tweeted about the other day. People going in on Jacob Bernard Docker and Travis Hamonic and who should be playing over the other, blah, blah, blah. I think that's just splitting hairs. This team, if they want to make it to the next level, they need some kind of defensive help. So I would imagine that if the right deal, it's very Captain Obvious to say, if the right deal comes along, I'm sure the Senators would try to make that deal because I think they really need help on that part of the ice.
Well, they need to find something, right? And you're right. This isn't an indictment on anyone who's currently playing, but they just don't have. You stack them up against the teams they're trying to get to the playoffs ahead of, the teams they're trying to beat if they get to the playoffs. They're not nearly as deep at that position as they need to be. Obviously have some nice high end players at the top end, but look at all the good teams. I think a team like Tampa, I think the Leafs even, which have made defensive improvements this year, Edmonton, you go down the list. A lot of teams are in the market to improve their blue lines. And usually when we're talking about that is second pairing or even third pairing decisions. But those players matter a lot. When you get in a playoff series and you matchup, you're playing the same teams again and again and again. If you have an older player like a Hamonic or just a player maybe that isn't as stout defensively as you like, I mean, they're going to get picked apart over a playoff series. So I would be stunned if Ottawa didn't make some kind of trade between now and March 7th to address the blue line.
Mm-hmm. Next one from Cody. Excuse me. Could any of these centers be targeted in a trade by the Nashville Predators? Any center needy team, and what would the most likely cost be? So they have 4 different centers here.
Okay.
Luca Del Beluz from Columbus, Atu Ratu out in Vancouver, Josh Norris in Ottawa, and Dylan Cousins in Buffalo.
Well, I think the latter two are more the kind of trade that Nashville would like to make. Because obviously if you were to get someone like Norris or get a Cousins, I think you'd feel really good about that player in that position for a long time. And, when it comes to Nashville, I think a big part of their season, quite honestly, they got out of the gates so slowly is they didn't have the right mix among their forward group, and in particular lacked, a first line center or second line center, someone who could, basically either share those duties with Ryan O'Reilly or supplant him to the number 2 spot, whatever it is. They didn't have enough down the middle. And so, they will be a buyer in Nashville, as weird as that sounds, even though the season hasn't gone well, if they can buy something like a player under 25 or 25 or so that can play center, that's signed to a number that makes sense, which I think both Norris and Cousins are. Now, for that reason, I don't expect either the Sabres or the Senators just to give up on those players necessarily. I mean, there's definitely a set of circumstances where it might make sense. Can't rule it out entirely, especially in Buffalo's case. I know Cousins, they've taken a lot of calls on him. There's a fair amount of interest. He's had a tough season, but he's also someone with 30 goals in a year under his belt. Big player, very hardworking player, and one that you could totally see, whether it's in Buffalo or whatever. Like, if you told me next season he's going to have a big year no matter where he's playing, I would buy it. He's just at the right age where he's getting better and where this season certainly hasn't gone his way. So I could see them being fits for Nashville. Remember, the Predators have 3 first-round picks in this current draft. They might have 2 in the next draft. Anyway, they've stockpiled some surplus there, and so I don't have specific rumors with those players, but I could see those being the types of players certainly that Barry Trotz is targeting.
Next question from Hayden. I'm not a fan of the Sabres, but watching them in utter freefall is hard to watch considering how awesome their fan base is. I know you're not a GM, but what do you think is their first step towards turning the slide and eventually the organization around? Merry Christmas, boys.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you too.
Thank you, Hayden.
I think they need, like, one thing I've heard described in my discussions around the league about Buffalo is just a sense that they're a bit of a soft team. Like, I think that they need maybe a little bit more element of players that are hard to play against. I think that sometimes that can be an attitude thing within a dressing room when you have those sorts of guys too. You can sort of see it. I mean, this long losing streak they had just before Christmas time, like, so many of the losses were 1-goal losses. Now, I know they got beat up in a couple games, right before the break. But prior to that, they had a long stretch of just losing 1-goal games. I mean, the margins weren't that big. And it just feels like if something doesn't go their way, that they get blown off course a little too easily. And so I would target players that are competitive, that are maybe, bring more than just scoring elements to the game. From an organizational standpoint, I also think they put Kevin Adams into a spot as someone who had no experience at all really working at that level of running a hockey team. This is definitely the benefit of hindsight, but I think they could have benefited from a stronger front office, just more experience, whether that's someone having in sort of a president's role who could have advised him. And so, I don't know what the future of the front office will be, but I think that they should, whether it's going and finding someone like Ken Holland, for example. I just think there's value to having people that have been there before, even if they're not your GM, but just to advise, to be there as a sounding board, for the person making those decisions. And so they definitely need to start making some steps in the right direction. I think that's why the Sabres are nervous. I mean, they were involved in a lot of trade discussions prior to the holiday roster freeze, and there's danger in making another bad deal, right? Because they've been on the wrong end of some trades. So I don't know that there's like one easy way back, but I would start prioritizing players that play the game a little bit harder, that bring other elements. And then from a inside the organization standpoint, I think they should build out the front office and have some more experience there because they have to make some difficult decisions ahead.
From Daniel Burt, start, bench, cut. Christmas morning, Christmas Eve, or Christmas Day afternoon?
Start, bench, cut.
Yeah, this one's a real thinker, huh?
Well, I guess I'll cut Christmas Day afternoon.
Okay.
Although now with the NFL games, that might actually be I really like Christmas Eve and Christmas morning. I was going to say of the three, Christmas afternoon, you're usually like kind of tired and dopey by that point. So if I had to, I'm probably starting Christmas morning. I guess I'm benching. Which is worse, bench or cut?
Cut is worse. Bench is still
I guess I'm benching Christmas Eve, although I do like Christmas Eve, and I'm going to cut Christmas Day afternoon, mostly just because of the three, it's my least favorite. I love the anticipation of Christmas and Christmas Eve. Christmas morning was always, even to this day as an adult, like it's always kind of like a champagne and orange juice kind of vibe. My mom used to have that before I was at a level where I was partaking, but as I got older, it's something we've all taken on. And I just like the idea of being around and having kind of a lazy, slow morning. And, there's no other day of the year where I'd say that would be a normal part of my day. So I'm starting Christmas morning and, I feel good about that.
Man, I'm thinking about it for
what are
myself.
you cutting, basically? That's the big question. Which is the least of three of those that...
I think of like my experiences on Christmas, like when I was a lot younger, like my family made sure that like we were doing everything to clean the house on Christmas Eve. So like Christmas Eve, I have a lot of reason to cut, but also like it's still cool that like you were all together and you have all that before Christmas. And then Christmas morning, like a lot of times, like we're all just like still like in bed. Like for me, like with my family, the way when I was a lot younger, the way we would do it is my mom would spend a bit of time making brunch for all of us. And like we're having a lot, like my mom's from Jamaica. So like we're eating a lot of like traditional Jamaican dishes, like your ackee and saltfish and dumpling and all that. And it's really good. And then like later in the day or the afternoon, the evening, maybe we're going to my grandma's house or going to some other relative. So I actually like the day and the afternoon because that's when you get to see all the family members. And then eventually you get to open all of your presents. Like you weren't
opening at like 6 a.m. I'm talking about when you were a kid. No, I don't mean like recently, but like,
not even when I was like a kid. Like presents was purely like later in the day, like evening type of thing. And more often than not, like you're waiting until you meet up with all of your, at least for me anyway, we waited until we met up with like my grandma and all my other cousins before we all opened up all of our gifts. So like day afternoon might actually start for me. And then more, here's the thing. In recent years, I've grown to appreciate Christmas Eve a lot more because as an adult, like I don't have to do the whole like, all right, I'm around my family, I gotta help clean the windows or whatever. It's like I just spend that time like seeing as many friends as I can. I try to see my godson every Christmas Eve now, and then I'll go back home and be with fam. So I think I'm gonna do Christmas Day afternoon start, Christmas Eve bench, Christmas morning cut. Because nothing happens in the morning. I'm sleeping.
There you go. There's no wrong answers there, though. I love the whole time, to be honest.
Yeah. I love that. That's one of those ones where there genuinely is no wrong answer. It really just depends on like how you go about celebrating your Christmas time. I like that. What other questions could we ask? This one from Maddie. When will the loser point die?
Never.
Never? How do you feel about the loser point?
I'm fine with it. The reason I don't think it'll die is I think if there's ever going to be a change is you're going to see like 3-point victories for regulation victories and then having 2 and 1, 2 for an overtime or shootout win and 1 for the loser. It makes sense. I mean, if you look at the way most sort of tournaments are scored now, like that's how they're scored other sports use a version of this. I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't think you're going to see the loser point go away though, because you want to incentivize the teams to really go for it in overtime. And I think if it's a 0-2 kind of situation, it might promote really boring overtime games because one team is scared to lose, right? So I think the loser point is a maybe if we blow up the entire system and start fresh and do something totally that I can't imagine. But as long as it looks like this now, I think the loser point's here to stay.
This next one from Wyatt McRae. Should the Leafs tell Austin Matthews to stay out of the Four Nations so he can be healthy for the club?
It's a delicate one, right? On the surface, I'm sure there's already that feeling behind the scenes a little bit. And just, given that he's been managing this injury since training camp, on again, off again, trying to get it right. Do you really want to go into those games? And, look, I've said this before, Julian, I'm not actually sure how intense they'll be, but I think it's fair to say they'll be pretty intense, especially once that tournament gets going. Maybe the first game for each team will be a little feeling out sort of process, but, I think they'll be physical. I think that they'll be emotional. And, Austin Matthews will be a main part of Team USA if he's there. So I can understand why you'd have some trepidation about that from the Leafs end of things. That being said, I don't know there's too much they can really do. I don't think they can forbid him from going. I mean, it's an NHL event. If he wants to be there and he feels he can be physically, then I suspect he will be. But, I'm sure deep down, not just the Leafs, but a lot of teams with their most valuable assets. I mean, they were scared to send those players to the Olympics. I mean, and the Olympics really means something. This tournament doesn't have the same larger meaning, and it could have, let's face it, somebody's going to get injured at that tournament. I hate to say it, but that's just the reality. It's that kind of sport. And, this happened years ago. John Tavares back in 2014 in Sochi got injured. The Islanders, basically their owner at the time said that's why they missed the playoffs. I don't know if that's actually true, but they made that claim, and they weren't happy to lose, at that point, their franchise's best player and their captain. So it's a delicate one. I'm sure if the Leafs had full control and there was no repercussions, they'd love to keep him out. But I mean, it's an NHL event. And if Austin wants to be there and he feels like he can be there, I suspect he will.
Few more for you left, Siege. From Sam, what is yours? I guess in case me, what is mine and CJ's favorite Christmas baking treat?
Ooh.
I can start if you're thinking.
You go first. Yeah, you go first.
When I was a lot younger, my church for fundraising would have these, I don't know what the name of the company was called, but they would sell these big vats of cookie dough. And I would always want the white macadamia one. And my mom would buy it, and I would enjoy white macadamia nut cookies every Christmas. So for me, like, I know it's not a specific like Christmas themed one, but that particular type of cookie it reminds me of a much simpler time in my life. So I will say it's that.
I think of shortbread when I think of Christmas time. Like, I feel like
that makes sense.
I'm not a huge sweet tooth. And I try to avoid the sort of sweets as much as I can around Christmas. But if there was a baking item, I think it would be shortbread. And I do like that. I just, I got lots of other things that I don't avoid. So because that one doesn't hold as much appeal, I didn't have any shortbread this Christmas period.
Oh, sorry.
I did have some chocolate though.
Well, of course you did.
Chocolate is definitely one of the things that I like.
Yeah. I'll remember that for next Christmas as a potential Christmas gift for you. Tyler James. A few weeks ago on the Spit and Chicklets podcast, Roberto Luongo talked about being tendered an offer sheet from Detroit after he was traded to Vancouver. Do you know of any other player, past or present, that have declined an offer sheet?
Ooh.
I have to think it's a bunch, right? Like, I mean, a player doesn't have to sign an offer sheet.
Yeah, I mean, it's like being offered a contract, or it's like being offered a job you don't take, essentially, right? Yeah. I mean, which has happened to lots of people. I remember when Mitch Marner, before doing his second contract in Toronto, that he had got 2 offer sheets, I believe. One was from Columbus. At least, I don't know. Again, I don't know the semantics of it. I don't know if they actually sent him the offer sheet or if there was just discussions like, hey, would you sign an offer sheet with us, and he declined at that time and ended up doing a 6-year deal with the Leafs that expires now. But that's one that jumps to mind. And Mitch actually talked about it a little bit at the time, about how it wasn't of interest to him. But there has to be a bunch. I mean, offer sheets are pretty rare because they haven't worked well. I mean, obviously we're coming off a summer where St. Louis executed 2 on a pair of Oilers teammates and got them both, but they generally haven't worked well. And also players don't want to sign them all the time. And so I'll get the Marner's the example that comes to mind, but there's probably been dozens that I don't even know about that, the guy just wants to stay where he is, but he's unsigned for a period of time and he's eligible to sign one, and other teams make those kind of inquiries.
Shout out to people on Discord who sent in questions as well. From Roderick, how is CJ feeling about the Cowboys being eliminated from playoff contention?
I mean, it was a big weight off. and this year was so weird. Like I never, with Dak getting injured and I didn't really believe in this year's team for any period of time. And so probably because I'm older and I've been through this a few times, like it wasn't as like disappointing as you'd think. It's been sort of disappointing to see them win a couple games now. You know what I mean? Because I did get on the board of like, well, I mean, if it's going to be this strange year and you lose your quarterback, like let's at least get a high draft pick. But then they've reeled off a few victories since they've been eliminated, and so they're hurting the draft position. So, we know lots of teams like this in the NHL. Like they're just totally in the mushy middle this season where they're really not terrible. But they're not good, and they're not going to the playoffs. So, if anything, I'd say it's a pressure-free year. I've kind of gotten around watching the Bills and the Lions when I can, and I'm sort of hoping one of those two teams, if not both, end up in the Super Bowl. I just think would be a cool story. Not hating on the Chiefs, but the Chiefs have had so much success. Like I think it would be kind of interesting, especially if Buffalo could get through Kansas City and get there. So I sort of have sentimental rooting interests, and then I'm still alive in my fantasy pool. So I'm playing in the championship game against Pierre LeBrun. Ooh. So if you want to send me some good vibes, I wouldn't mind beating Pierre. He is definitely favored in that championship game, but any given Sunday, who knows? I could come out as the champion.
So everyone in the immediate CJ Show universe is in a championship final. So you have a championship final. I'm in a league where I'm in a championship final. Producer Drew and producer Nick are playing against each other in the SDPN Fantasy Football League.
Wow.
So that's very interesting.
That is interesting because they go way back too. Like they're buddies since way before the SDPN days.
Oh yeah.
So it's like the dueling producers. And Drew thinks he knows everything. So, I mean, I'm sure Nick wouldn't mind pulling one over on him there in the championship.
Oh, yeah. I can't wait to see the trash talk play out in the group chat between those two because that's just going to be fireworks. Absolute fireworks. But yeah, shout out to us knowing our shit about football and getting to our respective championships. Hopefully we all win some chips. No shade to Pierre LeBrun, but
no shade,
Team CJ.
Major shade to Pierre LeBrun. Are you kidding? Sucks to suck, old man. Pierre. Sucks to suck.
Love it.
Dax Destroyers are going to give him all he can handle in this final.
That's your team name, Dax Destroyers?
Yeah, in that league, yeah.
I like that.
I'm When in Romo in the other league, and I'm Dax Destroyers in the other.
I like that. Mine is What Can Brown Do For You off of AJ Brown.
Right.
I don't know the other.
Do you have him on your team?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I have him on my team. I don't think I started him during my semifinal. It doesn't matter. We did enough to get there. Anyway, still got a few more on Discord if we still have time. These next two basically touch off on topics we touched on earlier this week. Congo Red, have you heard any front office opinions on Matt Rempe and his dangerous play?
Well, I mean, he's riding the line, right? He's now going to have to come back and prove that he can play, and that might have to be in Hartford. Frankly, I'm not sure he's going to get the chance right back with the Rangers, even once he served that 8-game suspension. But he needs to be someone, if it's Peter Laviolette or management, where they feel like they put him in a game, he can make a difference. He's not going to, cost him a 5-minute penalty. Like that's the other part of that hit on Heiskanen, which was just no way to defend that or find like a but to that. But he puts them down shorthanded in that game because he gets ejected, and then he's out for 8. So, he's on a fine line. He's on ice. He's got to bring a physical up tempo kind of game, but he obviously has to do it within the rules. And just very early in his career, he hasn't shown an ability to do that for any meaningful amount of time. Okay.
If the Elias Pettersson, JT Miller situation becomes untenable, which one is more likely to be moved? That's a question from K-Town2272.
Probably Pettersson, just because he doesn't have his no movement clause yet. You know, Pettersson's no movement clause kicks in on July 1st. And so if you had to trade one of them, it's probably easier to trade the one who doesn't have trade protection because he could be sent anywhere in the league. And I think he'd have a tremendous amount of value out there too. But, it's not to say it has to go that way. I just think if we're evaluating what's the more likely outcome, that's probably the more likely outcome.
From Colton Arthurs, will Flames ownership finally get over themselves so Nazem Kadri can come home? This is a big obsession over Leafs fans wanting Nazem Kadri back from Calgary.
I get it. I mean, just because he's such a popular player and because the Leafs have a need at center, and he left and went and won a Stanley Cup in Colorado and was pretty damn good for the Avalanche in that run. So I can understand where the hardcore fans are feeling that. I don't sense that's in the offing anytime soon. I won't say it will never happen, but Kadri still has quite a bit of runway left in that deal. The Flames are knocking around the playoffs themselves, and he's an important part of their team. But somehow certain players always find their way back to certain teams, right? So it could still happen yet at some point before the end of his career. But I would be surprised if the circumstances align that it was happening this season.
This one from Brandon. Can we please have the discussion about Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes? Some people are starting to believe that Hughes and Makar are the two best. I mean, they are the two best. And I think it'd be great conversation to compare the two and ultimately decide who's the top dog on D. Of course, it's Makar. Ha, 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 ha.
I mean, it probably is Makar.
Now,
but Quinn Hughes just won the Norris Trophy.
Close. Yeah.
And was full value for it. Makar had kind of an up and down season by his standards last year. But I think if you were starting your team with one defenseman and you could pick anyone in the league, I think a very, very high percentage of people making that decision would take Cale Makar. He's also one of the big reasons I think Team Canada, despite sort of going in as underdogs in the Four Nations, I think people might be sleeping on just how good the core of the Canadian team is and that how important Cale Makar will be in that. But I mean, both are amazing players. I think Cale's a little bit younger, and I mean they're difference makers. But I would be leaning towards Cale if I had to choose one of the two, which is not meant as a shot by any stretch at Quinn.
Like, if you had to start your franchise with Quinn Hughes as your number one defenseman, you're still happy either way. Even if it's not Cale Makar, like Quinn Hughes is such a special talent who can change the game and take over games on his own. Fine. All right. He's not Cale Makar, but like such an exceptional skater, exceptional offensive ability. Literally, if you're on the ice with him, you will get offense on your stick. Like there's no, like, it's weird to say there's no loser. Like I get it. Like there's a player who might be slightly better than the other, but you're not going home with damaged goods if Quinn Hughes is the defenseman you start your franchise with. He is an exceptional talent.
Right. It's funny. I heard Alex Pietrangelo doing an interview, though. It was around the Team Canada stuff. And he just casually threw in there that Makar for him is a once every 10 years type of player. Like, I think he's like, you have guys who win a Norris Trophy, which obviously Quinn Hughes do. And it's awesome because somebody has to win that every year. But I think he's like the player of his decade or something. Like, I think Makar is just a cut above overall. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Not a big loser if you end up with either of them, but to me, it's Makar.
Yeah, generational talent. I get that. I think that's going to do it for the Ask CJ mailbag episode. Well done. There were some fun questions. There were some hockey questions. We laughed about our Christmas traditions.
Dear Santa. It's not too late to catch that if you want to watch that movie, man. I know it's after Christmas now, but.
Yeah, I'll in between all the World Junior stuff, I'll find time to catch up on that. Thank you to everyone who listened. Subscribe to the podcast. Tap in for more great content from us and the Steve Dangle podcast, and Agent Provocateur, and everyone else on our network. And we'll see you all next time.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.